last minute cancellation last week, but we're going to pick up where we left off 2 weeks ago in our series about Mary Magdalene. So just to recap what we've been doing. So the first session we talked about Mary Magdalene, what do we know about her, what assumptions we made about her culturally, where did those assumptions come from, and which of those assumptions is biblically founded and which of those could potentially be related to the culture at the time. And then 2 weeks ago, we talked about devotion and service. So we talked about Mary Magdalene's devotion to Christ and how that's something that we need to emulate, and how her devotion then fueled her service. And her service was so strong because her service was rooted in her devotion to him. And her devotion is what motivated her service, which is why she never got discouraged, she never burnt out, and she kept going stronger and stronger and stronger in terms of her service, because it was rooted in the right foundation, which was her devotion to Christ. So today, we're going to talk about how her service, which was rooted in devotion, then made her fearless. So we mentioned last week or 2 weeks ago that each of these character traits that we're going to talk about are going to fuel each other. So one of the most common struggles that we have as Christians, as servants, as whatever you want to call it, is that we get burnt out, right? You go through these peaks and valleys of your spiritual life. You go through very high highs, very low lows. You're on fire one day and then you plateau and you're lukewarm, the week after. But somebody like Mary Magdalene is who we want to be, because nowhere can we find anywhere where she just kind of plateaued. Her service was stronger. Her devotion was stronger. Her zeal and her fire for Christ and for the service just kept getting stronger and stronger. So what is it about her that prevented that burnout? What is it about her that prevented that discouragement? And so we're going to talk about how each of these characteristics feeds the next one to prevent that kind of burnout or that kind of discouragement. So devotion fed her service. And today we're going to talk about how her service then fed her fearlessness. So I'm going to get someone to read. Mary, you're not driving, so I'm going to pick
up. Not driving. Okay, sure. Okay.
55.
Yes. And many women who followed Jesus from Galilee ministering to him were there looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons.
So this passage, one of many, talks about her presence at the cross. And so we know that at the point of crucifixion, there was a lot of fear among the apostles, a lot, because essentially they were being hunted, right? They were being hunted because he was being hunted. And that was, what founded, Peter's denial of Christ, is that fear. They were afraid for their lives. They were afraid for the consequences of being public about following him. They were afraid of what it meant for the rest of their lives to be loyal to him. And that's why at the cross, he had a pretty large inner circle, but those who were present at the cross were a very, very small proportion of that inner circle because of that fear. And so, his mom was there. It's his mom, okay? But Mary Magdalene was there, and St. John the Beloved, right? Mary, the mother of James, and Joseph, the mother of Zebedee, sure, okay? But such a small group compared to his following. And the reason it was such a small group is because essentially being present at the cross was like a suicide mission. Like it was a suicide risk, because everybody knew he was being hunted. Obviously, the people who hunted him were successful at what they did because he was literally being crucified. It was a public declaration of loyalty to somebody who is now being killed and to somebody whose followers are being hunted. So it was just a suicide mission, right? It was in terms of like your safety, okay? It was suicide because we know that the Jews were very heated about this. They were very heated about who follows him and how he stirred the pot and what he's making people believe, etc., to the point at which, crucifixion was a reasonable response to their dissatisfaction with his ministry, okay? And so in terms of life, okay, there was fear around whether being present at the cross would then affect your prospects for surviving because they were being hunted. But on top of that, outside of, whether or not you would be killed for being his disciple, there was also public shaming, right? Like, think about what happened to Peter. When Peter denied Christ, obviously he was afraid for his life, but a big part of that story was he was being shamed by the people who called him out for being one of his followers. And there was a lot of like social connotation, social pressure about being a follower of something that's not deemed to be socially acceptable and that's against the norm. There was a lot of public shaming. And that's why at the cross, being there, just physically being there, was a huge manifestation of fearlessness, because she didn't care about the prospects in terms of her life and her survival. She didn't care about the idea of shaming. We knew already that she doesn't care about the idea of shaming, because we talked last week and the week before about how she goes against the grain, right? She's just Mary Magdalene, not Mary the wife of, or the mother of, or the sister of. She's her own person. She has her own income wherever it is she gets it from, and she provided for Christ. We know that she did things that may have been perceived as socially unacceptable, but it didn't matter because she was fearless about them. And she was fearless about them because they were driven by the fact that this is her service. We talked about last week, one of the services that she did is just presence, being present. And because that is her service, because that's what she's committed to do, to show him that she loves him, that makes her fearless about it, because she's committed to the service. And whatever the obstacles are, whatever the hurdles are, whatever the risks are to her life or to her reputation or to whatever it is, it doesn't matter. She's fearless about it because this is her service. And because her service is rooted in her devotion to him. So this whole concept of being present as a service, like, it's a little bit of a novel idea, but if you think about it, it is probably one of the most effective things that you can do. Like, the servants that I remember as a kid are the servants that came to my graduations and came to my milestones, and they didn't do anything. It's not like they came bearing gifts or whatever, but they were there. They were present, right? Think about your closest friends, the people that are closest to you, when they're going through something difficult. Okay, you try to be there, and you may not have anything to do. In a tragic situation, there's nothing to be done. There is nothing that you can do to change the outcome of a situation, but you're there, and they remember that you're there. If you even just look at, like, I don't like to bring up this example because I have some like deep-rooted issues with, our cultures, like azas and whatever. I don't even know what they're called in English and whatever, but when they do the receiving line at the end, mind-boggling to me that you've just lost a loved one and you have to stand there and do a receiving line. Mind-boggling, okay? But if you think about like the purpose of the receiving line, it's for the people who attended the Aza, or I don't know, what's it called in English? Wake, I don't know, memorial, I'm not sure, okay? It's to be there for the grieving family. It's to be present for them. And their presence is not going to change the outcome. The person is still dead. They died. And the family is still grieving. But that presence is a service. Just being there and being present for somebody outside of the consequences of that presence is a service. And she took that service very seriously. And when we do that, okay, for whoever it is you need to be present for, whatever your service is, there are no consequences, okay? Maybe it's a little bit inconvenient to your time, whatever, but nobody's life is at risk, I think, right now, for being present. But her life, her reputation, like, everything was at risk for her to complete this service of being present. But it didn't matter because she was fearless about it. And she was fearless about it because it was driven by the fact that this is her service. And her zeal for service was driven by the fact that she is devoted to him. That's what made her fearless. I'll get someone to read Mark 16:1. Mary, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Um, Now, when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that they might come and anoint him. Very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen, and they said among themselves, "Who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb for us?"
Okay, so let's talk about this scenario a little bit, okay? So last week when we talked about what her services are, we acknowledged that she had a very wide range of services because what she did as the service didn't matter because she had figured out like that service is in the heart, that what you do doesn't actually matter. It's why you're doing it that matters. She already has that figured out, okay? So her presence is a service. We talked about after the resurrection, she went on with the apostles to preach and whatever, that's a service. One of the other services is this whole thing, this anointing thing, okay? And bringing the spices and whatever, okay? But let's talk about the social context. So because Christ's death was very high profile and very controversial, there were Roman guards that were stationed there, and there was a Roman seal on the tomb, okay? Because they kind of knew that there was like all this drama around it and that, people are being a bit weird about it and there's like, a lot of like controversy and people are out to prove something and whatever. And so to keep everybody in check and to keep everything controlled, they had Roman guards stationed there, okay? Roman guards are not subject to Jewish law. It's the other way around. The Jews are subject to Roman law, okay? And they have to respect the law of the land, which is the Roman law. That's the supreme authority, and they operate in their faith under the supreme authority, right? Like that's why we have that verse in the Bible, like render unto Caesar like taxes that are due or whatever, what is due unto Caesar, like because you are still subject to the law of the land, okay? The guards are there to prevent anybody from tampering with the body. That's what they're there for, okay? They don't care what the plan is for anointing or not anointing. It's not part of their culture. It's not part of their practices. They don't care, okay? They don't answer to the Jews. They don't answer to like their religious practices. They don't care, okay? And yet, Mary Magdalene and this fearless group of women decided, like in the dark, that they're going to go to the tomb and somehow convince the guards to let them pass. Guards whose sole purpose it is to prevent anybody from getting in. But they're somehow going to go and convince these guards that they need to get in. And that even though this is what the guards are supposed to do is preventing people from getting in, they're going to somehow convince them that they need to let them in. It's a little odd, right? It's a little presumptuous, okay? And it's a little bold, okay? First of all, for a group of women to make demands of Roman guards is very bold, very outside of normal, like socially acceptable practices, okay? Very, very ambitious. But it doesn't matter because she was fearless about it. This is her service. Yes, she appreciates that there's opposition. Yes, she appreciates that this seems impossible and that this may not make sense. She appreciates that. But it doesn't matter because she is fearless about it, because this is her service. She's committed to her service because her service is her way of showing him that she loves him. So she's going to be fearless about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It doesn't matter if it seems impossible. She's going to try. And she's not going to shy away from like the scary parts of what comes with that service. Because her fearlessness is driven by her zeal for the service, and her zeal for the service is driven by her devotion to him. I remember, I don't know if anybody here is well acquainted with Mbabola in Africa, but his, like anybody here who knows him knows his tagline. And his tagline is, do something crazy for the Lord. That's his tagline. Like every time he throws something at you, he throws a service at you, he throws a challenge at you that is petrifying, okay? If you like express the smallest hint of hesitation or like doubt, or like you ask a question, that's what he throws back at you, okay? So there was one time we were in like a suburb of Kenya, like it's called Maseno, and he was talking about taking us to a leprosy camp. Okay. I know it's crazy. Sometimes I remember the parts of Africa and it's like, it seems like a different universe because there are still leprosy camps. Like it's a camp where lepers live. Leprosy is essentially something that is very easily treated in like North America with penicillin. You get penicillin, they're not lepers anymore. That's it. Like it's not a big deal. But in places where they don't have access to the things that we take for granted, there are still things like leprosy camps, like in the Bible. So he's talking about taking us to a leprosy camp, and obviously we try and bring as many medications and whatever as we can. And there were, probably 3/4 of our group or more are not in healthcare, right? So the only thing that they know about leprosy is what they know from the Bible, right? And so there was one person who just asked, Sayyidina, is leprosy contagious? Oh my gosh. He absolutely decimated her. Like, just like laid into her and then took a bottle of ketchup and dumped it on her head. Okay. The dumping of ketchup on her head is funny. Okay. Funny, but also very aggravating because we showered maybe twice in our entire time in Africa because there's no running water. So like there's no way for her to wash that out because there's no running water. But it was a reflection of like how fearless you need to be about your service. Is that who cares if it's contagious or not? Who cares what this is going to do like to you and to your prospects and to whatever? Because you have to be fearless about your service if your service is rooted in the right place. If your service is rooted in your devotion to him, it doesn't matter what it takes. It doesn't matter what parts of the service or what might come with the service that is a little bit scary. And that's what's supposed to drive that fearlessness. And he laid into her. And Mary Magdalene already had this figured out. She already had the fearlessness figured out because she already had the foundation of service figured out long before anybody wrote about it, long before anybody had like the wordsmithing capability to articulate what it's supposed to be rooted in. She already had that figured out. And that's why she was fearless. All right, somebody else read John 20. I won't pick on Mary in case there's anybody who wants to volunteer to read. Tough crap. Anyone?
I can read.
Thank you.
Okay. John 20, verse 15. Jesus said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Woman, are you seeking? Whom are you seeking? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away.
All right. Again, let's talk about social context, okay? So at this point in the story, she had alerted Peter and the rest of them that he's not there, that the stone has been rolled away and he's not there, okay? They came, verified what she said, because maybe she's a crazy woman, we don't know, okay? Acknowledged that she's correct, he's not there, the stone has been rolled away, and then they leave and they go home, okay? She stays. She stays, okay? And then sees this person who she assumes is like a grounds person, okay? Is just working there, okay? And he approaches her and says, why are you weeping, okay? And she like presumptuously, okay, like almost assumes that he's taken him and just says, tell me where you have laid him and I will take him away. Very, very presumptuous. Even in her, like, her word choice is very presumptuous. How is she going to take him away? Is she going to carry him? Like, how is she going to take him away knowing that there are Roman orders that he cannot be touched? Knowing that there is, like, Roman decrees that say that nobody is to touch this body? How is she making demands of this person that she doesn't know? Like, sure, she doesn't work for him, okay? But socially, he's a guy. She's a girl. You can't do that. You can't talk that way. You can't make demands that way socially at the time. You can't do that. But it doesn't matter because she is committed to finding him. and to completing the service that she was charged to do. She's committed. And because she's committed, she's fearless about it. Because she's committed, it doesn't matter what the obstacle is. She's fearless about it. Okay, last one about her fearlessness. Okay, so we talked about, not last week, but 2 weeks ago, that there is tradition around what her service looked like after the ascension. Okay, in that she went and she spent a lot of her time in Rome with the apostles to preach the gospel. And so we talked about her audience with Emperor Tiberius and how she kind of started the whole Easter egg tradition, etc. So even trying to obtain an audience with the emperor is extremely bold. Okay, and I tried very hard to find context about how she got it. Like, how did Mary Magdalene, who is a nobody, okay, particularly because she's a woman, because at that time you were even more of a nobody if you were a woman, okay, obtain an audience with the emperor? I don't know. I don't know how she did it. Okay, I don't know how she was deemed important enough to obtain an audience. Okay, and in that audience with him, I don't know how her boldness fueled her to essentially accuse Emperor Tiberius of not doing his job by keeping Pilate in power because Pilate screwed up. That's essentially what she did. She went to Emperor Tiberius to tell him that Pilate had executed an innocent man. And then when he called her out on it, okay, the whole egg thing happened. But the audacity to even start this conversation with somebody who is an emperor. He's a Roman emperor. He doesn't report to Jewish law. He doesn't care. Like, they are not subject to any of the spiritual, religious, like anything with the Jews. But the audacity that she had to go, not only to talk about how Pilate had executed an innocent man, but then to explain to him the glory of the resurrection. Okay? Even the idea of a woman explaining something to a man or teaching something to a man. Forget the fact that he's an emperor. Okay? Just girl to guy. Okay? The audacity to explain something to a man is offensive at the time, okay, in and of itself. And then on top of that, he's Roman, okay? He is like nobility. He's in power. He's like a politician or whatever our equivalent is, okay? And like not religious. Like, the audacity. But she did it. And did it work? Yeah, it worked. She was right. She did it. Because she was fearless. Because her fearlessness is not fueled by her own boldness. It's not fueled by her own like self-confidence. Her fearlessness is fueled by him and her service to him, which is rooted in her devotion to him. And that's what made her fearless, right? I used to be, when I was younger and much more obnoxious than I am now, which is saying a lot, I used to be one of those people that's like, oh, well, if you can't take the heat, then stay out of the kitchen. Like, if you can't handle my answer, then don't ask me a question. And I didn't understand like the necessity of an appropriate delivery in your message, right? And sometimes I still don't, like, you know, that's not, I haven't completely figured it out yet, but like, you know, one of those people that like is unapologetic for their rudeness, okay? And that lack of being apologetic for your rudeness, okay, is rooted in your own pride, right? Like, it's rooted in your own pride and your confidence in what you're saying, right? Or like, oh, this is my personality. I love those people now because I see myself in them. And when I was much younger, and I just have so much to tell them. Like, I have so much to tell you about how your life could be a lot easier if you can just have this part figured out. I wish I'd figured it out a lot earlier, okay? But it's rooted in your own like wanting to hear yourself speak, or like your own pride in what you're saying, or your own confidence in what you're saying, or your own like inability to be wrong, okay? And that's what makes you fearless about what you say. You don't care what the consequences are or whatever, okay? That's very different from what she's doing, okay? Her fearlessness is not rooted in her own confidence in like her opinions. Her fearlessness is rooted in him, right? And at the end of the day, because her focus is solely around him, sure, maybe there are consequences, but it doesn't matter because she only sees him. And any consequences that are part of, the path of her service are consequences that she happily accepts because it's all about him. And if this is the path that she has to take to get to him, and it includes consequences or whatever, struggle or strife or tribulation or whatever, she's happy to do it. And she's not afraid of them because at the end of the day, those struggles are paving her way towards him and they're well worth it. And like, I want to make sure people understand the distinction between fearlessness in terms of Mary Magdalene and the perceived fearlessness that often people have when it's rooted in their own confidence or their own like pride, because that's not the same. She's fearless and correctly fearless because her focus is on him and because everything she's doing is about him. Okay, you'd be an idiot to be fearless about something that's completely about you if there are consequences attached to it, because just because like it's about you doesn't mean that it's right. But she knows that this is about him. She knows that this is for him, because of him, through him, in search of him. Like, it's all about him. So the fearlessness is justified, okay? Fearlessness about yourself and your opinions is not justified because you could be an idiot. Like, who's to say that what you're saying is correct or not correct? And if you're like blind about it and you have your blinders on, you're not listening to anybody else, who's to say that you're right or wrong? Okay, but she knows that he is the supreme good. She knows that everything, like in pursuit of him and in service to him and in devotion to him, is correct, which is what roots her fearlessness, which is what makes her unafraid of the consequences. Because at the end of the day, if those consequences pave her path toward him, that's great. She gets to him even faster. So, devotion drove her service, and her service made her fearless, okay? Her fearlessness makes her set apart. Okay, just one more time, because it's like the Krebs cycle. I don't know if anybody here was in chemistry when they were younger. It's like each step feeds the next one, okay? So she's devoted to him, okay? Her devotion fuels her zeal for service, okay? And her zeal and commitment to the service makes her fearless about it. And her fearlessness then makes her set apart. Mark 16:9. Now when he rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 demons. Okay? He appeared first to Mary Magdalene. It is obvious that she's set apart. Okay? She's not just set apart from the women who followed him. She's set apart from everybody who followed him. Okay? I don't like to categorize necessarily like women with women and men with men. Like, oh, she's set apart for a woman. Okay? No. She is set apart, period. Relative to everybody that followed her. That's not to say that Peter's not set apart. Peter's amazing. I'm a big fan of Peter. You guys know I love Peter. I have a whole series on Peter, okay? But she is also set apart. She's different than the rest of the people who followed him, not just men and women, okay? I'm a little bit like, pardon the sidebar, okay? I'm a little bit heated about this one part, okay? I don't love the concept of like affirmative action for women, okay? Like, I'm all about like equality and all that stuff. Like, I have no issues with that, okay? I'm not this like Stepford wife, okay? But I don't believe that we should have a quota of women just because they're women. I believe that we should have the most qualified person in a role, whether they're a man or a woman. I don't care, okay? It's about qualifications. It's not because I'm a woman that I have to fulfill X number of spots to make us look diverse. I don't care about that. That to me, that's mind-boggling, and I find it a little bit insulting that I would get further in life with a lower bar because I'm a woman. I don't like that, okay? That's why I'm making the distinction that she's set apart, not just from the women, okay, who followed him, but she's set apart, okay? Because she wasn't the first woman he appeared to. She was the first person that he appeared to, okay? And he had a pretty solid inner circle. Like St. John the Beloved is called St. John the Beloved. Like, is there a higher title than St. John the Beloved, okay? Like, he has a solid inner circle. You guys know I have an affinity for Peter. But she was the first person that he appeared to, okay? Why? It is obvious that she is set apart. It is obvious. It is obvious that she is different from everybody else who followed him, okay? My theory is that part of the reason she's set apart is because she had all this figured out. She didn't need anybody to articulate this for her. She didn't need to read these like long-winded books about what it's supposed to look like and whatever. She already had this figured out because her heart was in the right place. Her heart was with him. Her heart was devoted to him. And the devotion drove her service, and the service made her fearless. And so whatever needed to be done for him and through him and in him and because of him and in search of him, she would do, no matter what it looked like. Because her heart was in the right place. And the superficial perception is that she's fearless. But there are things that made her fearless that are like the precursor to that fearlessness. And the first step is the heart. And I think that part of the reason she was so set apart is because what was in her heart was so obvious. Because she had all this figured out already. So I have a developing interest in reading like the different perspectives of the Gospels, okay? Because you can see a lot about the writer in the way they write things, okay? So you can see the differences like about Luke and John in the way they write about the same like scenario, okay? And then when you get deeper into like, I mean, don't go down this rabbit hole because like it's taken me down like a really big rabbit hole, but like you can then look at like the social context and who they were and what their backgrounds are, and some of that like, you know, gives you a little bit of insight into why they wrote things the way they did, etc. So if you look at the four Gospels, okay, and you look at the way Mary Magdalene is wrote about in all four of the Gospels, Luke is the most skeptical of her, okay? Like Luke is the most like not about that, okay? John is like, she's like great and she's this and she's that, like she was the first, and she's like, he writes very, very highly of her, okay? Luke, he's like the least fan out of all of them, okay? And it makes sense with who he is in terms of context. He's very like traditional and blah, 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 okay? But even Luke, okay? Even Luke, who appears to be like the least of her fans, even Luke acknowledges that she's set apart, okay? Then they returned from the tomb and told all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. And their words seemed to them like idle tales, and they did not believe them, okay? Remember I mentioned earlier that, you know, she went to the tomb, she wasn't there, she went back and told Peter, and then Peter had to come and verify because maybe she's a crazy woman, okay? This is literally Luke saying that. And their words seemed to them like idle tales, and they did not believe them. Maybe this is just women crazy, okay? And like you can see like the skepticism in his words, okay? But even Luke acknowledges that they were the first to see, and that they were the apostle to the apostles. That they carried the resurrection and the news of the resurrection from the tomb to the rest of the apostles. Even Luke, even the one who's like not a big fan, can't deny that she is set apart, that she's different. And when you look, like every time this like solid group of women is mentioned, okay, I really like this idea of this like team of women. Like they push each other to serve, and they like strengthen each other, and they uplift each other. Like it's what a group of women are supposed to do to each other. And there's a name for them. I think they're called like the holy myrrh bearers or something like that, okay? Like, even when you see them listed, she's usually listed first. Like, it's usually Mary Magdalene and Joanna and. Like, Mary Magdalene and Mary the wife of Cleopas and. Even Luke, okay, who's not the biggest fan, can't deny that she is set apart. That she is different from the people who followed him. Not just the women who followed him, from the people who followed him. She's different. So what does this mean for us? Okay, I can sit here and talk to you about all the contextual stuff about Mary Magdalene and all the history and all the culture and all that stuff is very exciting, okay? But what does this mean for you? What does this make you do differently? Because if it makes you do nothing differently, then I'm just wasting my breath. Just go take a nap with my kids, okay? But what does this change for your life, okay? Devotion. Are you devoted? Are you in love with him? Is he on your mind and your thoughts all the time? When you think about being devoted to somebody, okay, maybe it's just me because I love relationship goals, but the first thing you think about is a guy-girl relationship, okay? And when somebody's newly in a relationship, that's all they talk about, that's all they think about. They text each other all day and they do the hair flips and the whatever, okay? And they just occupy mind space. Do you do that? Is he always on the forefront of your mind or somewhere in there? If you're a girl, there's probably many thoughts happening at once. Is he one of the 10,000 thoughts that are happening at once? If not, do you understand that he loves you? Do you believe that he loves you? Do you honestly feel like you have a relationship, like a back and forth relationship? I could do like a whole hour on this concept of devotion. We did a series about it a long time ago. I can't remember what it was called, Falling in Love with Him or something like that, okay? Where we talked about this whole concept of falling in love with him and how do you fall in love with Christ? How do you start that devotion that Mary Magdalene had for him? What is your starting point? Do you have that? If we want to be Mary Magdalene, if we want to emulate who she was and what she accomplished and like what she was to him and what he was to her, I think that this is the first step. We talked about how she was set apart because her heart was in the right place. Where is your heart? And like, don't get me wrong, okay? Falling in love with him is not something that is like, for me, intuitive. Like, it was something that I had to learn like at an older age. Like, it they make falling in love with somebody in the movie sound like it's just like it's like a spark and like chemistry and blah, 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 and it just happens and you just like stumble in love with somebody and it just happens to you, okay? I mean, maybe, I don't know if I fully agree with that, even in a like guy-girl relationship, but with him, there's a lot of like social and cultural stuff that we're taught that sometimes takes away from this concept of being in love with him, right? Like when you're a kid, depending on, the cultural context of your home where you grew up, there could have been a lot of like, the punishment that was harped on, or like the wrath or the anger of God that was harped on, and sometimes this whole like lovey-dovey part of your relationship with him is like glossed over or is overlooked. So what narrative have you been told? Are you in love with him? Are you devoted to him? Do you understand that he loves you? Do you feel that he loves you? Do you see his love for you in your day-to-day? If you don't, I would encourage you to try. I mean, I can't get into it right now. We already have a series on it, and I'm sure it's accessible somewhere, and I'm sure there are many other series somewhere else that are better about falling in love with him, but I do think that this is the first step. Are you devoted to him? Because once your heart is in the right place, that then feeds everything else. So are you in love with him? And then assuming that you are, okay, do you serve him? Why do you serve? Is your service rooted in what you feel to be a gap in service? Or is your service rooted in the fact that you need to show him that you love him? Do you serve because you love him, or do you serve because you feel like you need to? And what is your service? Does it matter? Is your service something that you've chosen out of convenience for yourself? Or is your service something that was chosen for you? Are you picky about your services? Like, I'll do this, but I won't do this. Why? What is your service about? Is your service about you, or is your service about him? When you are serving and you become discouraged, or you become disillusioned, or you lose your fire for the service, why are you losing your fire for the service? Is it about you, or is it about him? In whatever service you're doing, if the numbers are low or whatever your measure of success is not there, do you lose your commitment to the service? Why? Is your service about you, or is your service about him? Is your service about the gratification of seeing the fruits of your labor, or is your service about showing him that you love him regardless? What is your service? Are you fearless? What are the parts of your relationship with him that you are not willing to talk about? What are the parts of your relationship with him that you're not willing to discuss in a public setting with non-Christians? What are you afraid of, and why are you afraid of it? Is there anything that motivates you to push past that fear? Or is that fear a wall that you can't seem to get past? Is your service being held back by whatever that fear is? Do you feel set apart? Do you feel like you are different from the world, or do you feel like you just blend right in? Do you feel like you stand out, or do you feel like you're just the same as everybody else? But more importantly, do you feel special to him? Do you feel like he's chosen you? Do you feel like you are favored by him and that you are set apart and that you are one of his like inner circle? Do you feel set apart to him? This one is important, okay? Because being set apart and feeling set apart are then going to fuel our next week, okay? So you can't feel or be set apart without everything else, okay? Without the devotion and the service and the fearlessness, okay? But once you are set apart, it will then fuel what we're going to talk about next week, which then continues the cycle. And I think that these last two steps are what prevents Mary Magdalene, and hopefully us one day, from getting discouraged and from burning out and from going through these lukewarm phases. So do you feel special to him? Do you feel like he has chosen you and that you are set apart and you are one of his inner circle? All right. So that's all I have. Sorry, that's next week's. Any questions, concerns, heresies, blasphemies, something you want to fight about? Let me know.
Hey, Sarah, I think the reason why Luke was skeptical, he was a doctor. He was a scientist.
Those doctors.
That's why maybe he's a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, it's very consistent with how, like, the context of who he was. Like, he's very, like, analytical. He's very, like, facts-based. But yes, he wasn't talking to those doctors. You stay away from them.
Sarah, I just have a quick question. So when you say, feeling like you're set apart, I feel like sometimes our feelings are not entirely accurate. And don't you think it is actually a fact that we're set apart? by following Christ and by being rooted in him? Or is it more of like, are you like, do you mean it in a way that you know, like you're truly believing that you're set apart? Or do you mean it more in a factual, like you are set apart from the world by being rooted in him?
So I'll give you an analogy which maybe will explain what I mean. So I am married, okay? It is a fact that my husband loves me, okay? That is a fact. He wouldn't have married me if he didn't love me, okay? And I can probably pull out 10 things that he's done in the last 24 hours that prove that he loves me. It is a fact, okay? Do I always feel like he loves me? No. And does the way I feel change fact? No. But does it change my perception of him and how I respond to him? Yes. Does it change how I act? Yes. So fact, Rami loves me, okay? On the days where I don't feel loved, which is my own flaw in perception, okay, not a change in his feelings, do I talk to him differently, respond differently, do things differently? Yes. Do I carry myself differently? Yes. So it's the same thing with God. Are you set apart? Yes. Do you feel set apart? Because if you don't feel set apart, then you act differently, you serve differently, you carry yourself differently, and you believe things differently. If you believe that you are a daughter or a son of the king, then you act like it. But if you are not convinced that day or that whatever that you carry yourself differently. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you respond to him differently, you talk to him differently. I talk to my husband different than I used to talk to him when we were dating. Because when we were dating, I didn't know or believe that he loved me. Now I know. I'm presumptuous, I'm bolder, I have the capability of asking more of him because I believe that he loves me. I will ask him to do X, Y, and Z for me because I believe that he loves me, things that I would never ever dare to ask him when we were dating, because I know that I am loved. So whether you believe that you're set apart doesn't change the fact that you are. What it changes is what you do and how you act and how you carry yourself. So that's why it's important for us to feel like we are set apart. It's important for us to feel loved. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean now. So it is sort of internalizing this fact and making it more personal to who we are.
And yeah, and believing him when he tells you that he loves you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. So I think we will continue next week with the is it the second to last, Sarah, or
The last one. Next week is the last one.
yeah, the last part of the series, and it is going to be a talk titled Loved and Humbled. And it is still continuing to talk about Mary Magdalene. If you're not on our mailing list, please leave your email here in the chat or email us at onroute@smsv.ca. And would love to see you all next week.
Just to add, the series that Sarah, you were talking about, Falling in Love with You, is actually on YouTube under the SMZ playlist. You can find the 4-part series. We did it last May. It's like a year ago. Yep.
2020, when it was like a few months in COVID, basically.
Yeah.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
All right.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sarah. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, Sarah.
Beautiful Sunday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.